Throughout Arcane, Silco is shown to us to be a very logical, pragmatic, and cutthroat individual. He is a hyper-intelligent individual that not only understands the conditions of what caused him to want to act in the first place, but the consequences of said actions. The best episode in the entire show is actually name-dropped by Silco himself, the base violence necessary for change. And this level of logical reasoning and understanding that Silco constantly shows throughout Season 1 is exactly why I love his relationship with Jinx so much. Now, while I wouldn't consider Jinx a wholly irrational person, there is some rhyme to her reason. One thing is for absolute sure, she is highly unpredictable. And this level of unpredictability is something that the Silco we meet in Act 1 of Season 1 should absolutely despise and loathe. And while Silco definitely expresses a ton of frustration at Jinx throughout Season 1, he never really lashes out at her too aggressively. Even when he does get seriously angry with her, he always respects her boundary. An amazing example of this is when Silco enters Jinx's room after she blows up the Enforcers. This is the most infuriated we have seen Silco be with Jinx, and while he is acting aggressive towards her, he never actually makes physical contact with her. Instead of hitting her hand or hitting her on the back of the head like some abusive parents might do, instead he just grabs the pencil out of her hands. And then when he actually goes and grabs the hex core from her, he doesn't grab her hand, he just politely and gently grabs the core itself with 3 fingers. Now, while he doesn't act like this the whole time, there definitely are some scenes where he does make some physical contact and sees that she gets uncomfortable. For the most part, he's very respectful of her boundaries. Another aspect of Silco's relationship with Jinx that I've always adored is the fact that he really does make a ton of excuses for her. While she is without a doubt a very gifted and talented individual, the amount of chaos that she causes him on a daily basis just really shouldn't be worth it. He even tells Vander in the final episodes that if he really were to just give her up, all he would lose is problems. From a pragmatic and logical approach, there is absolutely no reason that he should keep her around. She is nothing but trouble for him. And this brings us to what I think is the most interesting part about Silco's character, what he means to me personally, and what he means for the world. And that is his concept of unconditional love for Jinx. Like I said previously, Silco is a very conditional man who understands the in and outs of every decision that he decides to make. But because for the first time in his life, he's formed an actual unconditional loving bond with another, all of his logical reasoning gets thrown out the window for this individual. And now I want to take a step back and really talk about the meta and how love is viewed in society today. From my perspective at least, the modern idea of love has been skewed, strangled, and messed up to the point where it's unrecognizable. In many instances, love is actually viewed as a negative thing, something that is weaponized and used to manipulate and abuse others, something that is highly toxic. And in many toxic relationships, there are often many different conditions when it comes to loving another person. Specifically when it comes to parent-child relationships, very often children feel that if they do not succeed in the specific aspects that their parents want them to succeed in, their conditions will not be met and they will not be loved. And this is something I've noticed a overwhelming majority of children feel. And what's even worse is they feel this way not because they're being illogical, but because they're actually making a ton of sense. And while I can't speak for people outside of the United States, here in America it very much feels like most parents are living vicariously through their children. And this just ends up creating very unfortunate and toxic relationships where everything revolves around one or multiple conditions. And unfortunately for the later generations, many of this ends up getting passed down. And for those of you that might be thinking I'm over-exaggerating, I'm speaking from personal experience here. A few bad apples who condition the idea of love in order to manipulate and overpower others can really ruin dozens of people for generations. And what's even crazier is most of the people committing these heinous acts aren't viewed as bad people. They probably have somewhat stable jobs. From the outside, probably look like they actually have good families. And worst of all, what always comes with this narcissistic behavior is they actually think what they are doing is the right thing. And this is exactly what makes Silco so interesting. Silco is beyond messed up. He is a drug kingpin who's openly ruined hundreds if not thousands of people's lives. He has both directly and indirectly killed hundreds of people. And what's so insane about this is he recognizes this, weaponizes it, and flaunts it for all those to see. He is not the good guy, he is not the hero of this story, and he is not pretending to be one. And what makes this all the more worse is, like in the real world, his toxic traits have been passed on and amplified by his daughter. Not only does Jinx have to deal with all of her own trauma, she also has to deal with her father's. And this created the perfect storm for a mentally unhealthy individual. Now, some of you might be asking, if all of this is true, what is the point of this video, and why do so many people love the relationship between Silco and Jinx if it's all toxic? And the answer is, for all of their individual issues, Silco does in fact love Jinx unconditionally. Is he a perfect dad? Absolutely not. Does he make a ton of mistakes? Of course. Does he push her in the wrong direction? Absolutely. He is a very toxic parent, and in one major specific way, it is revealed that he does want some semblance of control over her. But this is much more nuanced than just the bad guy wanting control over his minion. And what I'm talking about is when Violet comes back, he stops at nothing to try and stop Violet from meeting Jinx. And while I think part of this is a control thing, that he doesn't want to lose control over his daughter, I think what it also is he just doesn't want to lose the love that he shares with her. I think a part of Silco fears that if Violet were to re-enter the picture, he might get pushed out and she could replace him in some way. To further my point, there is a great saying: actions speak louder than words. When Jinx is on death's door after she blows herself up on the bridge, there is an unbelievable amount of real, terrifying fear in Silco's eyes. This is not an evil monster who happened to lose one of his top lieutenants. This is a father in true, overwhelming fear of the fact that he might lose his daughter. A father that will stop at nothing to protect his daughter, a father that will stop at nothing to bring his daughter back from the brink, and a father that for all intents and purposes really does cherish her. And a quick note about the scene where Jinx gets shimmerfied: Silco in fact puts himself in danger to get this done. When Sin shoots Silco up with the tranquilizer, if we're being honest, that could have been anything. That could have been poison, that could have been something to paralyze him, whatever it is, he was in a very compromised position. This is one of the only moments in the entire show where when Silco isn't directly in his lounge, he is out in the open without any form of guards. And to make this even better, this is probably something that he took into account and just didn't care about because time was of the essence and what was most important to him was saving Jinx. However, as you all probably already know, the true moment that Silco shows Jinx of unconditional love comes at the end of season 1. In this moment, Silco is offered everything he's ever wanted on a silver platter. Everything he's ever wanted, everything he's worked for, all the sacrifices, all the pain, all the suffering has all led up to this moment, and he, for all intents and purposes, has won. Zaun will be free, and Silco was the one who would have gotten it done for them, with somewhat minimal bloodshed as well, because originally Vander and Silco believed it would take a war to free Zaun. Silco actually found a way to construct a relatively diplomatic situation where Zaun was freed from Piltover, under one simple condition: he has to give up Jinx. He is now faced with the exact same question that the golden child father Vander was faced with at the start of season 1. Will he give up one of his children who did in fact do something wrong in the name of peace? And remember, Silco is a very cutthroat and logical person. And from a logical perspective, this is 10 times better than a win-win. Not only does Silco achieve everything he ever wanted and everything he ever sacrificed for, but he also gets a free chance to get rid of a huge burden, that being Jinx. However, as we all know, he decides not to. And what makes this all the more better is it's not only that he decided not to do it, for the most part, it doesn't even seem like he thought much about it. When Jace hands over the terms to Silco and walks past him, after he says the name Jinx, if you pay attention to Silco's eyes, there is this great little detail of animation where you see Silco shake. And I believe the reason this little detail in animation is there is to show you that this was the one thing Jace could have said that immediately would have raised a red flag for Silco and it wouldn't have worked. And not only is it the one thing Jace could have said, I believe this is something that Silco himself did not see coming. I fully believe that this is a feeling Silco does not want and wishes he didn't have, but nevertheless, here he is. He cannot undo the years of love and bonding he has for Jinx, and cannot give her up, even for his dream. So in a moment of pure, unconditional love, he decides he's not going through with it. And as if this wasn't enough to prove the fact that Silco really does love Jinx with his whole heart, we get to one of the final scenes of season 1. The moment where Jinx kills Silco is one of the hardest hitting moments in any piece of fiction that I have ever seen. After Jinx has realized what she has done, and she goes to start talking to Silco, I did not know what was going to come out of his mouth. And we keep going back to this idea. This is a cutthroat, logical, and to some, evil individual. An individual that understands he has just been killed by someone he loves and someone that loves him. And I would be willing to put a large amount of money on the idea that if most people were placed in the same situation as Silco, they would not be too pleased. At the very least, they would not be complimenting and going out of their way to comfort their killer. But that is what Silco does, because his actions speak louder than his words. And when push came to shove, it didn't matter what was happening, didn't matter what the situation was, didn't matter what Jinx did. At the end of the day, Silco loved her unconditionally. And what makes this all the more impactful for Jinx is he loves her just the way she is, flaws and all. He isn't like Violet, Echo, Caitlyn, or the rest of society that expect her to be something else, expect her to be someone else. Silco just loves her for her. And the reason this was so personally impactful to me and many others is this type of unconditional, holistic, true love isn't something you get to see in the real world all that often. And in a very weird, tragic, and messed up way, this level of love that Silco has for Jinx is something that a lot of parents can really learn from. Or at the very least, it's something that the watchers of Arcane can keep in mind when over the next few decades they become parents themselves. But yeah, I just wanted to take some time and talk about a part of Arcane that I really love, that being Season 1. Silco is my favorite character, and over the last week and moving forward, I've done a lot of dogging on Season 2, and I will continue to do that, but what I think is most important is however bad Season 2 is, for all of its flaws, for all its mistakes, Season 1, when it stands alone, is still an amazing piece of fiction, and in my opinion, the best season of television ever made. So apart from the somewhat critical analysis of Season 2 that I've been doing, I'm definitely going to be sprinkling in here and there some love for Season 1, because Arcane Season 1 is a full-blown masterpiece.